So, first of all, this is episode 3 of the Big Booty Heroes podcast. I want to say I'm not here to create division. I'm here to have discussions. I still remember a time when politics weren't so extreme. Um, People had views, but everybody wanted what was good for America, what was good for our children, what was good for ourselves, what was good for our future. We weren't arguing because one group thinks that something wildly different as far as the future looks good, and then other people cannot. Our tables are getting so far apart. There's no middle ground. We've blown the middle ground up, um, and um, and I hate it. If there's one thing I could fix in America, it would be the division. It would be the extremist politics. The far left or right are the worst things that we have currently in this country. Um, for normal people like us, like the people watching, the people in control. There's only a few pairs of eyeballs. There's hundreds of millions of people, regular people watching that are affected by um, those people at the top arguing and being unwilling to have a normal, moderate stance on topics that make sense to everybody. Um, this is clear that the ideas being put forth only make sense to those in the camp, and the camps are getting more and more entrenched and more unwilling to even have a concept of meeting in the middle again. I have only been watching the Shawn Ryan show for a very short time. I think that's true for a lot of people. We're only on episode 58 is the one that we're going to be watching today, but he has done, I think, up to, I'm not sure. He's done a couple more since then, but it's pretty new podcast. It's become very popular very quickly, and I'm starting to understand why. As I watch it, I'm realizing that he has people that are part of this system, especially the mechanisms of control, the CIA, the military. The government has no ability to execute their authority without these types of agencies, and the military is a big part of our foreign policy, obviously. Um, but this podcast is just full of so many instances that made me, want to kind of touch on comments that they're making. The more people that are talking about this, the better. I don't think that these Shawn Ryan and his guests are not what I would say are um, wingnuts that are entrenched in some sort of crazy ideology. They're um, pretty traditional, pretty standard. I am fine with change. I think it should just be incremental, because change can actually cause more problems, and I think it should be supported by the masses. A lot of people say that America is a democracy. It's not. It's a republic. It's a system of laws and founding documents that govern the the things that the government do. It's not just the will of the people. The will of the people is the votes and the elections, but the representatives pass the laws, and they are constrained by the Constitution and other documents, the Bill of Rights, and the things that have kept our country running for 200 plus years. And I am now looking at this and wondering if we're kind of headed toward a collapse. And I don't know if the desperation and the as as political opponents get more bold, let's say, and start doing things right in our face that we all see but nobody is talking about because they've ruined our ability to have a discussion. So we all see this stuff, but nobody's talking because on one side you're afraid to talk. If you have conservative views, you're afraid to talk because you might offend the other side, and they do touch on that. I'm polite. I don't want to offend you. If you want to be called a certain pronoun, I don't have a problem with that. If you want to change your gender as an adult, I don't have a problem with that either. What I do have a problem with is making this part of the fabric of the education system. What I do have is adults or people in positions of authority who children are going to look up to, suggesting this stuff and opening their mind to it at an age where a lot of children want to be a dinosaur. I want to be a T-Rex. I'm 5 years old. Somebody says, hey, you could also, try out being a girl. Okay, let's do that too. Um, I, I'm I speak from a place where what I'm saying is if I was a child and adults gave me the freedom to do whatever I wanted without consequence, I don't think that would have been good for me because I already had consequences and did a bunch of shit that I wasn't supposed to do, and in hindsight, I view as not being good for me in my childhood. And my dad tried to tell me this, that when I was around 40, things would start to make sense about why he was the way he was, and I never wanted to listen. But boy, those words echo in my ears today. So let's get into this. I'm not going to react to the whole episode. I'm going to try to keep this a little bit more reasonable on time. This is so chock full. I'm going to hit a couple key points. I don't even have these exactly practiced. There's just everything is it's dense. There's a lot of info here I want to talk about. So I'm just going to pick a couple points and we'll listen to what he's got to say to start.
A regime that does not feel bound by, never mind traditions and conventions, but law that we're all supposed to agree on, which I do not think you have with the Democrat left. And I have criticisms of Republicans too, and we can get into some of that. But when you have a regime that does not feel bound by tradition and law, and you have an intelligence service or an intelligence apparatus that feels its primary mission is to the regime and not to the people and not to the Constitution, really bad things can happen. And I do believe that is where we are.
I do too. I 100% believe that. I mean, do you think there's any turning back?
Oh God, I mean, I like to think that there's always room for optimism, and there's always hope that things can start to move in a better direction. Here's my, let me tell you I'll kind of war game out the concern, and then.
So we're talking about the political actors. I have the same concern. I've had the same thought. Is there a way to reel this back, to rewind time just far enough to get to the point where we as Americans can have discussions? Screw the people at the top that don't want to come together. If we want to fix things, we can start having regular discussions in our communities, at the grocery store, with our neighbors. We can engage and say, hey, you remember when we used to be, like all on the same page? Like, would you rather this? Would you rather this extreme opposition, or would you rather go back to having communities and relationships with other people that weren't adversarial because of different views? I mean, people are losing friends over politics. I mean, politics is just as stupid as money. It's meaningless. It's only supposed to make our lives better and more organized. It's not supposed to negatively affect our lives and make them worse. So is there a way to come back from this? Yes, and it would have to be, instead of mobilizing for 2024 to go vote for president, what we should be doing is ignoring that whole charade and mobilizing to oppose what both sides are doing. The Republicans and the Democrats are not doing anything that is good for us. It's time for a serious discussion about the third option, which has been completely irrelevant for so long because people are, it seems like to me, I'm not a political scientist. I don't have a degree in any of this stuff, but it seems to me that people just discredit that as even being an option, and they're so likely to be part of a team that, and they want to be a part of the winning team, so they choose one of the sides they think is going to win. But if you don't want either side to win, you shouldn't be supporting them. If you don't feel represented by the current system, we need to go outside, think outside the box, get outside the system, mobilize. I mean, if they can do rebellions like the Arab Spring that happened a few years ago now, all mobilized through social media platforms, uh, I think we can do it too as Americans, even though we've got Netflix distracting us and there's a whole bunch of luxuries that we are still able to enjoy that keep us comfortable enough so that we don't do anything. Um, I would say, if you feel okay about being lazy because it's, my life and who cares, that's fine. But if you care at all about the next generation, if you're patriotic, you care about the future of this country, um, I think we have to come up with a way to talk about this stuff, or they're gonna drive this country into the ground. If we're not able to have discussions, America's done, and I hate to say that because I love this country. I love especially what it used to be a few years ago. I hope that we can get back to you know somewhat some kind of unity. I miss when America was unified. You remember when the 9/11 attacks happened and everybody was on the same page for a little while? I don't, God forbid that something like that happens again, but that type of energy is what we need to bring back.
Then maybe you and I can both come to how this can get a lot better. One of the biggest challenges we have is, I think, as things in this country become more tyrannical, and I do believe that's the appropriate word. And you could say, oh, but what about Trump won? And then and Republicans and this. The agenda and the change continues even when we win elections. Mm-hmm. This is because of the seizure, because of the control of so many of the choke points, platforms, levers of power within our society, politically and outside of the immediate realm of politics. The agenda continues, and our notion of this as a country bound by the Constitution, where the individual is the paramount, the individual is the highest realm of freedom, rights, and the need to protect from the state, that is dwindling, I think, very, very rapidly. And I think that if you look at it on a broader spectrum, instead of just thinking, oh, well, today is fine, yesterday was fine, maybe tomorrow will be great too. They've already indicted a president, former president, who's he is a likely next Republican candidate. They've indicted him on the most absurd grounds imaginable. If you gathered together a bunch of law school students, you get in the project, say, come up with the flimsiest felony prosecution of a politician or of a person you could, I think that this would win the prize, right? A payoff to a porn star that was supposed to be labeled as a campaign expense. It makes no sense. No one believes this makes any sense, but they did it. And I've been saying all along, well, why do they do it, right? People ask this question, why do they do it? And I say, well, because they are building. They're building to bigger things, conspiracy to commit sedition or whatever the official federal jargon may be, but they've got effectively sedition or treason charges on the books now against some of the January 6 guys. And I think eventually they're going to hit Trump with a sedition charge, effectively call him a traitor. And now for people who say they can't really want to do that because of what that would do to the country, right? I mean, now, how are we different from one of these hellholes where, you and your brothers in arms would have to show up back in the day and try to stop everybody from just murdering each other in the streets? Like, how different is our political system really over the long term from the political system in those places if we get to the point where the one party's guy, I mean, this is what happens in Russia, right? This is what happens in countries that we mock for how, absurd their system is. This is what you see in like one of the stands where they have elections, but it's 97% goes to the guy who happens to control the secret police. They bring a federal insurrection charge of some kind against Donald Trump, and they finally see through the promise that they've made to the Democrat base, starting all the way back in 2016 with Russia collusion. They have been conditioning, again, they have been conditioning their base and their people in this country to be open to the idea of a president who is a traitor, and to believe that we have a president who is a traitor. Now, the people that paid attention to Russia, the people who paid attention to the whole collusion narrative, they understand it's propaganda, it was lies, it was a deep state operation. Okay, fine. They don't care about those people because they don't think they have to. They think they'll have enough to just finally silence the opposition. And what do they really ultimately want? They want a one-party state. What do they have in California? And look, I love California. I'm not saying California is the Soviet Union, but what do they have? They have a one-party state. Mm-hmm. What do they think they can achieve in this country? I think they believe they can achieve. Nominally, it's a democracy, sure, or a republic. But I think they believe they can achieve a de facto one-party state. And the way to do it is to just completely destroy the existing Republican Party by indicting and maybe even imprisoning Donald Trump. And they'll feel good about themselves as they do it because they've convinced themselves that Donald Trump is a traitor to his country, even though the Russia thing's a lie. They don't believe it's a lie.
Introducing custom t-shirts. Sticker Mill makes it easy to turn any design into a...
Or Biden's son. Because it's looking like in the media they're going to go after him.
So,
okay, before we get into that, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not the biggest Trump supporter ever, but I did agree with the idea of having a border. A lot of countries do that. They have a border and they have border controls. Canada does it, and somehow that's fine. They make me show my passport if I want to go over there, and I believe you can't go across the border if you have a DUI. So even as an American, you can't enter Canada and drive in their country just to visit if you've ever gotten a DUI, from my understanding. So and I also understood that China has been manipulating their currency. They've got tariffs that are, one directional, so we can't import goods. They're protecting their own internal economy from, even though our goods are expensive. Just let's say their currency got really strong accidentally because their economy was doing really well. Our currency was devalued. Our economy was hurting. We start trying to sell goods in China to build our economy up. We can't do that. We can't compete because there's a 20% tariff to bring goods in. So even if Ford can make a car for $10,000 and the cheapest car is $15,000 in China, even though our car is cheaper after tariffs, they're going to try to bring the cost of that cheaper American car up so that the preference is to buy Chinese. That's okay for them to do, but it's not okay for America to do. And that has a lot to do with the way that our currency works, the way that it's the global reserve currency at the moment. We've been taking advantage of that, and there's economists that say that we have to behave this way. We have to continue to print money and provide the world with more liquidity. There's hundreds of billions of dollars in U.S. currency that's overseas because it's needed to buy oil. So because the petrodollar is a thing, foreign countries need to have dollars in order to buy oil on the oil market. If that changed, then all the spending and all the inflation of the fiat currency that we've been doing falls apart very, very quickly. Our ability to print is tied to the fact that we're the reserve currency. We are the all oil is traded in our currency. These things make it so that we can do this to an extent. Also, the fact that our debt is denominated in our own currency. As we inflate the currency, we also inflate the debt and devalue both. So just like your bank account is devalued, so is our total debt load, because the money just becomes less valuable. So, I mean, there are certain people that think we can inflate our debt away, but that doesn't make a lot of sense to me because we also inflate our purchasing power away at the same time. So I think long term, it's been shown that endlessly printing money is not a sustainable thing. So, is this country headed for a one-party system? I certainly hope not, but it already feels that way because neither party is representing us. So it might as well be one party. Both parties are useless and have become, weaponized ideologues, not representatives of everyday working Americans who want to raise their kids, want them to grow up to be productive, well-balanced, mentally stable adults. I don't think that's not an extreme view, I don't think. Please, if you're watching this and you feel like that's an extreme view, please tell me why that's inflammatory. Please tell me why wanting a better future for every single American, where we can talk and have barbecues and hang out with your neighbor and, not lose friends on Facebook over political arguments that don't benefit us. I'd love to hear that explanation.
So this is a great question. Generally speaking, Democrats, as we know, live by an entirely different set of rules, right? When they matter to the party, people say, "Oh, what about some city councilman that was found with, a paper bag with $200,000 in it?" A little bit, except.
What does your video sound like? Go to art.
I actually don't exactly agree with that last point. I would say that both parties get away with a ton of crap. Both parties have corruption, bribery, profiteering off the stock market when they set policy and change laws. They have insider knowledge. Both parties are rotten. The whole system needs to be held accountable. Politicians need to be held accountable. Term limits would be helpful, so that you don't get these deeply entrenched, deeply bought politicians who are there as a career. That was never the intent for career politicians, and we also weren't supposed to have a huge standing military. These are in the founding documents. Like, you're supposed to refresh the government because people, as they get used to that power, sometimes it corrupts them. It's better not to let someone be in office indefinitely. The other issue is all the money that is in the electoral system. The real way back is to demand that normal people, like if I wanted to hold office, I'd need to go find financial backing or be independently wealthy. That's not that was not the intent of the system in this country. And that's the easiest way to illustrate that the system is bought. You can't get elected without a huge war chest because the other side has that. The only way to even the playing field for normal people with normal views is to make it so that that's not allowed. You're not allowed to spend $100 million to get elected. You have a certain amount of money, and it's equal for all candidates, and that would bring back merit to the election, hopefully.
Instead of machines. I think that there's a belief in this country that we have, with the fall of the wall and the collapse of the Soviets, that we have defeated collectivism, right? They're done, finished, put aside communist China, which is really a hybrid model. It's not communist in the purely Marxist sense. It's obviously operating on a market economy, but there's some other. Anyway, that's another part of the conversation. Like, what's going on in this country? There's been collectivist infiltration ideologically of the most powerful institutions in America, even outside of elected office, and that has been a decades-long process where there are people who are true believers who push this stuff, who push collectivism, who push different we're having conversations all the time about, well, is it cultural Marxism we should call it, or wokeism, or where did this thing come from? And the reality is it's always been there. It's just gotten more powerful and it's taken different pathways than it has historically in other places. I mean, McCarthy. I mean, here's a perfect example of this, right? People throw on this term, they'll say, that's McCarthyism. It's like, oh my gosh. It's like not as bad as like racism, but McCarthyism is another bad ism, right? McCarthy was mostly right. What he was saying was overwhelmingly true. It was certainly true about the high-level penetrations of the United States government by not just communist sympathizers, but by the KGB. I mean, this is very real, and we know this. We know this because of the top-secret military project, the Venona Project Venona. So there were communist infiltrations of the United States government at senior levels. There were a lot of them. Whittaker Chambers wrote his book Witness. I bring this book up to conservatives all the time. I'm like, you guys have read Witness, right? Oh no, I don't Witness. It's how he was a communist in America helping the Soviets and realized what evil this was and turned around and then devoted.
So I just wanted to touch on this. The education system in America is definitely got a left-leaning bent, and I'm not going to get into the reasons why that is, really, at least not deeply, but it just seems like the people who have taken control of these institutions slowly. Most colleges have a decent amount of openly Marxist professors. I would say probably more Marxist professors that would admit that they are, socially minded than Republicans. And if there are Republicans on college campuses, I think that they kind of keep their mouth shut and keep their head down. So they probably won't avow themselves. You're less likely to be an avowed Republican on a college campus than an avowed Marxist. Believe it or not, that's where we're at. And I'm not exactly sure why people still believe that these systems that have failed over and over, because communism's great. Socialism's great. The idea of everybody being taken care of is absolutely amazing. But you see how corrupt the government's behaving right now. Picture if we funneled all your wage and all corporate profits through the government, and they had access to that. They would be the delegator of all resource. They get all of it, and then they redistribute it as they see fit, as it should be. And with altruistic people at the helm, that could work for a while, until it gets corrupted, until people start swiping money off the table and it starts disappearing, and then people are starving and the system is falling apart because the masses have less than they should, and certain people that are in charge of who gets what are putting a lot of things in their pocket, and then everybody wonders why there's not enough for the people when those in power are suddenly buying islands and countries and whatever they want, maybe building their own private military. So I don't know. In a vacuum, or if AI could control the socialist government, if we find that AI is not evil and immoral and greedy and selfish like human beings are, maybe it could work. I mean, but the reality is pretty much any technological or social advancement that we believe is going to, make our lives better and give us more free time is not the case. I worked in a manufacturing role for a while, and in the old days, machinists were paid excellent money and manual machining was done by people. Now you've got computer controlled machines that are machining parts, and the workers get paid much less, so you have to work more to make enough money to accomplish to be able to afford to live your life. And so they sell it like this technology is going to give you more free time. You won't have to work as much. No, it's going to increase their profits because they're going to fire you and replace you with a computer. And then you're going to be home and jobless, and you're not going to be afforded some universal basic income, because that means you can just sit around and do whatever you want and think about the things that would make you happier, which might include some changes to the way they're handling things. So they can't have you they can't give you enough time to think critically and mobilize and develop unique ideas. And they want to keep you busy and distracted with what they want. The school system teaches you to do what you're told, and adulthood is much the same. Do what you're told, don't question it, and be productive and busy. Don't think too much. That's not good for the system.
Devoted his life to defeating this menace, and people are. This is sort of, this part of our history has all been forgotten. The fight against the totalitarian collectivism of the 20th century that resulted in, oh, we don't, this is why. And then they do, why are you so focused on this? Are you a bigot? Something wrong with you? You a bad person? Turn it around right away. Classic mind control tactics, classic techniques of.
So I just jumped into the next section, but this is basically talking about acceptance. So this might not be the pedophile section, but they're talking about, okay, it's not okay for this behavior, but let's at least be tolerant and allow this person to exist and explain themselves, whatever beliefs or things that they're doing that we might not agree with. Let's not persecute them. Let's allow them to have their day, and then you get used to, oh, this is a thing, and it's boiling the frog in the water, putting the frog in the pot of water, and then bringing it up to the boil so that the frog never realizes that he's being boiled alive.
Of brainwashing. And brainwashing, comes from communism, by the way. I mean, the whole term of brainwash is a term taken from Mandarin Chinese for wash brain, which is what was said to have been done to prisoners of the communist regime. Because some of them came out and they're like, they were changed, right? They were fundamentally changed through the isolation, torture, stress techniques, struggle sessions, all of that, which we could talk more about. So, but they tell you that these things aren't happening, and they actually are happening. And everyone needs to understand that. And it's very real.
That's kind of, nobody seems to know where the head of the snake is on this. Where is it coming from?
This is a camera lucida, and for the whole
within all of us, unfortunately, it's the existence of evil in humanity, and of, the devil is the father of lies. And I'm not somebody who talks about church or faith or anything really very much publicly, but we are in a phase, we're entering a phase here in this country where I think that evil is getting its way much more than any of us would have anticipated even 20 or 30 years ago. I think that.
So I just did a short video about this the other day. Apparently, what I read online is that Tucker Carlson was fired from Fox because his talk of good and evil and theology, religion, was making Rupert Murdoch uncomfortable. And this was further confirmed by another article that claims that Rupert Murdoch's ex-fiancée, the reason that their engagement fell apart is because she started to become religious and started to look toward the Bible. So I think that they want to remove the idea of good and evil. I think that they want to make you stop worshiping God. You should worship power instead, power and money. And and then you worship them, and you worship the system that they want you to continue to the hamster wheel that they want you to continue to run on. So, the God is a threat to their control. God used to be a secondary system of control. They want to get rid of it, so there's only one. And they don't want you to look at things through a lens of good and evil. They want you to just look at it as, what do I want to do? There is no such thing as good and evil. And then that alleviates a lot of the constraints that prevent them from doing some of the stuff they seem to want to do. We're starting to hear about a term that I've never heard of called MAP. It's a minor attracted person. That's what we're replacing pedophile with. So at first you tolerate it. It's not acceptable, but you tolerate it and you listen to them and hear what's wrong with them. It's a condition, and then that's how you boil the frog slowly, is you just slowly bring it up to temperature, and then 5-10 years ago, after working on it long enough, they're ready to roll out, okay, now we're doing legislative changes and we're going to back up this acceptance with decriminalization, and we're just slowly rolling back the kind of guardrails of human behavior that keeps us on a track where we're not abusing children and we're not committing evil, atrocious acts against each other, and we're also not treating each other like shit and arguing over everything, because that's toxic as well. And all this stuff is being shoved down our throat, and it sometimes feels like there's really not a lot we can do. And I'm really hoping that we can turn this around and get people off the couch and engaged in this process, engaged in turning this around now before it is too late.